Louisville, Kentucky to doing business all over the United States? Well, it's because you're only as good as your toolkit. And no, this is not a commercial for Villa Title, but it's just me telling you how important it is to have that right title partner. So John, welcome. Thank you for spending your hour this morning educating all of us.
Yeah, thank you so much. Excited to talk to the group, answer any questions, and get into short sales a little bit.
Absolutely. All right, guys. So we're going to have some slides up at the front of this class, and then we're going to get into some really nitty gritty, awesome things as it relates to how we pursue other avenues of finding these short sale opportunities. All right. All right. So today, why is your title partner so important? Well, you've heard me say this. Preliminary title. Hey, Michelle, go ahead and mute, or Kate, whoever that is, or Diana, mute them for me. Thank you. What is your title partner, and why are they so important? Okay, so you've heard me say this. We need to understand what all liens could be out there on this property, right? We need to understand if there's a second mortgage. We need to understand, you know, if they haven't been paying that HOA, right? And so one of the first things that I do is I get that listing appointment, but the second thing I do is I reach out to John and I say, John, I need preliminary title ran on da-da-da-da-da. And what do we do with that, John? Easily going through that list.
Yep, perfect. So, and the biggest thing too, I just want to make a clarification out there. And I think what separates Villa a little bit, but you know, there's other title companies that are in the same boat. And the key thing to understand is, you know, you go to your title company that you've been using on your traditional purchases and you say, hey, I've got a short sale. You know, can you handle this? 9 times out of 10, they're going to say yes, because in their brain, it's a, you know, a normal purchase, but I can't emphasize enough how different it is than a standard purchase, and that your title company needs to have short sale and default experience, because if they don't, then it's going to be a terrible process, and most likely you're not going to be able to close on the sale, because title really is super important here to make sure you're identifying every different type of lien that's out there. You understand who's in first lien position, who's in second lien position, what needs to be paid, and have a clear outline of that, and someone who's familiar with the process, because it is a lengthier sale and it's more complex than a traditional purchase. So it's just super important to have kind of that system expert and subject expert, especially if when you're newer into the short sale space, as they can really help guide you and do a lot of that work for you. But yeah, as Stephanie said, you want to order that first prelim title search, because you need to know and educate prospective buyers what's on title, what needs to be cleared, and what it's going to take to close this asset. So, you know, when you go through us, we pull that, and it normally takes 3 to 5 days, and we'll send it back to you, you know, in a commitment form. So it's super clean, easy for you to read. We will identify, hey, here's all your active liens. Here's everything that needs to be cleared in order to get through this sale. And, you know, with the dollar amounts, links to the actual documents, etc. So really important. So, you know, from an education standpoint, hey, here's the people I'm going to be talking to. You can educate prospective buyers and just get ahead of the whole process.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, we talk about speed, right? Actually, you know, the short sale is because it's selling short of the loan, but also too, I want to make a short sale a short selling process, which is very difficult sometimes to do. And it's only because an agent hasn't pre-planned for those circumstances, or maybe they don't have the right title partner to be able to understand all of these things. But when we understand the debtors that have liens or the potentials of liens filed, you got to remember, these could be credit card companies, you know, somebody that didn't pay their Visa bill, right? This could be an IRS debt. It could be a state tax lien. It could be property tax. It could be the contractor. It can be a number of things, medical bill collections. But it's easy for me to be able, because title companies are in this space of having to get lien payoffs every single day, that's their specialty, that they can then initiate the ordering of all of those payoffs so that we understand who are we going to have to start negotiating with? It's amazing when I look back through the past files that I've done on short sales and have negotiated literally from anything from actual mortgages on the property to contractors to HOA to mental institutions. Yes, I'm one of those that had that issue where a seller didn't have great insurance, right? And had this huge deductible that she was supposed to pay and never paid it. And they ended up filing a lien on her credit, which then attaches to her asset, which happened to be the home she lived in. And so this list, I mean, it can be extensive, but it doesn't mean it's never going to happen. It doesn't mean you go, oh God, this is way too much work, because that's what the title partners are there to help us do.
Exactly. And just, jumping on that, Stephanie, it's so important to understand who is owed money, where they are in the lien process. And I know someone said that they were looking up and just saw less pendants on an HOA, but a lot of people don't understand how powerful HOAs are. And a lot of HOAs in a lot of states, they can actually foreclose or take over ownership of the home if they are not paying their HOA. So, that's one we're working with a good partner when they're looking at the CC&Rs, the HOA restrictions and the HOA documents. For example, like Villa, we always go to the HOA first and look at that, because in their bylaws, they might have the power to, jump into first lien position or take over the home or have to approve the sale. So you could go through, I know we're going to go into this a little more, but hey, we're paying off this mortgage and we're doing this, and the HOA is, $1,500 or, $5,000. We're not going to pay that fully out. And it's like, well, if you don't know the specifics, they could shut down the whole sale because they have the power to, because when that person bought that home, they are not realizing, what they essentially signed up for. And then also just on that note, understanding the debtors, right? Government agencies, if it's a government-backed loan, they're going to have different requirements, maybe be more lenient in certain states. So that, okay, we have more flexibility here and we don't have as much flexibility over here. So just, again, using a strong title company and understanding everything on that and knowing what debtors owed what and how powerful they are is going to make exactly what Stephanie said. You want to have all this knowledge up front so that when you go to list and you go to sale, everyone's prepped and everyone's ready to go.
That's absolutely right. And what I always like to do, last week and the week before, we talked about how preparing that package that goes into the lender is so important, right? And how you keep your file at the top of the stack and not be one of those problematic files that's missing a bunch of stuff. And that lender's got to keep coming back to you asking for more. Well, you've got to understand these payoffs and all these debtors that are on a file so that you can list them on the preliminary closing disclosure. And this is, again, where we're real estate agents, right? Some of us are real estate brokers, but we are not the preparers of CDs, closing disclosures, or HUD-1s, and all of that they've been called in the past. And so yet again, this is where your title partner comes into play to prepare that preliminary closing disclosure, listing out the value of what you think that house is worth, what your broker price opinion says it's worth, and then listing out every single debt that's owed so that when that lender receives your package, guess what? They can see, holy moly, this is, we're going to have to take a settlement, right? Because there's other people that have taken a lien on this property that are going to have to get satisfied to an extent. Right? And so that's how you start those proper negotiations with the debtor. And so basically what John and I have done today is we've put in a real file. We've redacted, where this is, who it is, all of that information. But what we're focusing on here today is exactly what that preliminary closing disclosure is going to look like. Okay? And so on here, and I've done this in sections because, it's a very long sheet and I wanted to blow it up enough so that you can see. This property, in my opinion, is $150,000. That's what the BPO is. That's what I'm going to be focusing on. Okay. We're going to look at the settlement charges, which we'll get to that in a minute, but we've listed them out just like normal, okay? Now, I know that closing disclosures look differently now when you sit down and do the actual sale and purchase of the property, okay? But for the preliminary circumstances, we go back to the old HUD-1 form because it's easy for the bank to understand it and justify, and we don't need all the extra noise, okay? So it works out just fine, all right? Now, what's important about this page is where we are listing out what the payoffs, what other debts are there on that property, what the county tax prorations are, what everything is there. So on this property, we actually have a payoff for a civil penalty lien, but then there's an additional judgment lien, okay? Now, the original payoff to this house is about $163,000. I think I had it on the previous slide. So we're really not that much short, but because of these additional liens, that's where they come into play. And the reason why I want this part of my original preliminary statement going into the lender day one with my original package is because I want them to understand that countering at 13,000 or 16,000 is not going to be enough to prevent the short sale from happening. Does that make sense? Because we can't get rid of this civil penalty lien and we can't get rid of this judgment lien. We're going to have to get them paid. And this seller has $0. They've got $203 in their bank account and their utilities just got turned off due to non-payment, right? So these are the reasons why we have to be cognizant up front of giving that lender the clear perspective. Because correct me if I'm wrong, John, but these asset service companies, which the loan servicing companies we'll get into, the actual lenders themselves, but they're not updating title on these properties. They really don't have a clue necessarily that these liens have been filed.
Exactly. Yeah. So they, title, obviously, when the property is purchased is issued and that's stored, but then they're not pulling it because they, essentially have no reason to until there's another incident. So you're being the first person to come present this to them and say, hey, we need to sell this property. We think we can sell it at this much. And here's the breakdown of everything. But yeah, exactly to Stephanie's point, they have no idea what's going to be on title. And so you're essentially presenting the case to them, educating them on what their borrower currently has and is owed on the property and who needs to be paid off. And then, they're going to make, exactly like Stephanie said, when you present it in a concise, easy manner, and they look at what you've presented, they don't have the time to go and do their own research and figure everything out unless there's stuff wrong and you don't have that full package. But when they do, they're going to look at this and be like, oh, okay, this makes sense. Here's what the property's valued at. Here's what we're owed. Here's what all these other people are owed. So do we want to haggle over 13,000 or do we want to take 150 now and approve it and move forward? And
right.
Most times it's the second.
Yeah. And so basically what I've done here is with the title partners done a reverse presentation, okay? Because we're starting out with that $150,000 purchase price. I'm adding in all the other necessary debts. And for those that aren't aware, the seller's side is the right side of the screen, okay? This is page one, and this is a typical page one. What I want to make sure of is my line 603, cash from seller, is 0. I want them to know day one, they're not bringing money to the table. They don't have any money to bring to the table. That is extremely important. I've worked with other title providers in the past, back in my heyday of doing these, where they always put that number as what was upside down. Okay. And so let's say we're upside down $53,000. They're putting $53,000 there. My seller's not bringing $53,000, and I never want that negotiator at the bank to ever think they are. So I keep it at 0 on purpose. And then we just reverse those numbers back based on all typical expenses. And so when we go to line or page 2 of the closing disclosure, we're going to talk about the commissions. We're going to talk about, because why? Hey, that is money that is owed. It's the cost of selling this property. We've got to put it on there. All right. We're going to talk about the settlement and closing cost fees on the seller's side, because there is an expense for title companies to do this work. And so that's going to be listed right there as well as that title examination fee. Now, John, correct me if I'm wrong, but in different states, these numbers are a little bit different, right? And so you've got to reach out to your title partner or John or somebody to make sure, don't go off of these. This happens to be for a deal in Louisville, Kentucky, and that's what we know it is actually costing. Okay, so don't get those in your head because it is very different.
And on that point too, that's when we were talking about understanding your debtors and who, essentially owns the mortgage, is because government agencies have different allowables. So they might have a max price. Oh, hey, for a title exam, Fannie Mae is only going to allow 350 in this state, and they might allow 500 in Texas. And so it's really going to differ by state and by, what type of loan is on as is in the first mortgage. So again, really important why you want to communicate and have a strong title company who knows all the different regulations and laws when it comes to short sales and all the different policies and government agencies and can help you along that process.
Absolutely. So when you title those up or total those up on this transaction, you happen to be at $11,150 in expenses to sell this property. Remember, the sales price is $150. Now we've got to add or subtract off of this amount of money, right? Then we've also got to subtract off those other additional liens, which is why this property is definitely a short sale by the tune of about $36,000 that the seller or that the lender is not going to recoup. I want to pause there, or John, if you have anything to add to that, please do. And then I want to open it up a little bit for some questions in case anybody is confused. Anybody? Quiet bunch, quiet bunch. That's okay. Very good. So when we come back to page 1 of the closing disclosure, let me move my screen there. There we go. So the payoff to this first lender, which in this case happens to be Bank of America, they're going to get $133,585. Okay. And so that's how we've done that reverse math. This is a preliminary settlement statement. It is not something that is how the deal's actually going to close, but this paints the picture and gives them the visual of what I feel is going to happen. And that is why these files, when you submit them like this, as well as the paperwork we did in last week's class, right? And then you combine it with your BPO, then you combine it with this preliminary HUD, that is why you can streamline this process of short sales, okay? Now, we've had a lot of conversation over the course of the last couple of classes about, are short sales coming back? Is this going to be something? Because in a lot of markets right now, you're right, there hasn't been as many houses that are selling for less than what's owed, unless you have some of these civil penalty cases or additional liens, right? Or, maybe they didn't buy in the last couple of years and their price hasn't corrected. So we have those opportunities. But one of the biggest reasons why I wanted John to be on here today is not only to add value to the title component of this, but to also talk about the loan servicing companies. Villa Title is owned by Carrington. And John, I'm going to turn it over to you so that you can explain to the group exactly what Carrington is.
Yeah, so Villa Title, and I'm employed by Carrington Holding Company, and we essentially do everything in the residential real estate space. We've got a capital markets arm that buys and sells legacy loan pools from Bank of America, Chase, et cetera. And then we have a direct lender that will originate mortgages, which like I'm sure you guys are familiar with. And then we have the servicing side that then once that loan is originated, then that company's whole job is to collect those monthly payments, service the loan. And then, obviously that company has divisions of, active mortgages, default, loss mitigation, short sale. So all these different divisions that we're servicing under our loan book. And then, we're a large government servicer. So let's say that, the mortgage gets issued, it's then federally backed by one of the government agencies. And that's what I was getting kind of into the different aspects of you need to understand, who ultimately owns the mortgage, if it's a private money lender, hard money lender. So we are in that loan servicing space. And so, very active in that community. We're a top 10 mortgage servicer in the United States. We've got about 1.2 million loans under service. And exactly to Stephanie's point right now, you hear a lot of people talking in the market that, oh, we're not sure what's going to happen because people have equity in their homes, which is true. But we're seeing right now is that, as home values are dropping, savings rates are dropping, credit card debt's never been higher. People are working through that equity in their home, right? They're getting out a second mortgage, or they're paying, getting a HELOC or a home equity line of credit, and their home value is dropping. So soon, if unemployment continues down this rate, basically, we're predicting that you're going to start to see a large uptick in short sales and or foreclosures. And basically, what happens there is you've got a loan, you bought it in, 2020 or 2022, kind of the height of the market. And now the home values have gone under. And so what you were appraised at and what you were able to take out is now greater than the value of your home. And then you become a short sale candidate because you realize, and maybe you lost your job, that you can't pay your mortgage payment. And so right now, I'd say we're kind of like, if you look at a bell curve, right, we're kind of right at the bottom where we're working through all the equity and where people are getting a cash out, lump sum. And now it's starting to go into that uptick of the short sale and foreclosure volume. And just to give you an example on the market in general. So in the US mortgage market, there's about 5 trillion in mortgages out there, which is a larger number than most of us can compute in our head. But 80% of those, so 80% of the entire mortgage market was issued between 2020 and 2022. It's never happened before in the history of the mortgage market. That was due to extremely low rates and the COVID and the housing boom, basically. So you've got to understand that out of the 5 trillion mortgages out there, 4 trillion of them were issued during a peak home value and low rates time. And now values are dropping, rates are rising. So creating the value to drop. So a lot of that is creating this kind of boom, and so on the Carrington side, and about industry standard and government-backed loans, it's about a 10% rate, right? So let's just say for easy math, you've got 100,000 mortgages or 100 mortgages, you're under service. 10% of those are defaulting or going into short sale. So that's 10. I mean, multiply that by 4 trillion. It's a big number. So there's a lot of this starting to come into the market, and a lot of people realizing and trying to get ahead of it is, hey, I need to short sale my house right now so I don't get foreclosed on when I don't have a choice in a year or in 6 months. So this is definitely a real thing, and there's a ton of volume out there. And I think, Stephanie's doing a great job of getting out in front of it and educating you guys, because a lot of agents on both the residential and the commercial side are hearing a lot of different things out there and don't think this wave of short sales and foreclosures are coming. And much like a lot of title companies out there don't understand how to do a short sale, a lot of agents and brokers don't know how to either. So you guys are going to be ahead of this market in this wave, educated, be able to speak on it, have partners who can help you work through it. And kind of where we talked about is you really want to start looking at who are big loan service companies out there, who is managing essentially that debt. It's going to be a good candidate that you want to create a relationship with, that asset manager, et cetera, because those are now going to become really your clients, right? If you establish, and we do it on the Carrington side, right? If we know an agent is really strong in short sale, they sell the property for what they're going to sell it to, well, then when we have a short sale candidate, because we can identify that, we're going to pick up the phone and say, hey, Michelle, the last 3 homes you sold for what you said they were. We got paid out. Your package is always done well. Well, guess what? I'm calling Michelle when I have a home in that area. And that's what we do, right? We don't want to work with people who aren't good at their jobs or are new to a short sale. We want to know that package is is coming in complete. It's easy for us. We can work through the home. So I think that's, in a long-winded answer of getting back to what Stephanie's saying is, this is definitely coming, and you want to get good at it so you can create these relationships with these loan servicers out there, because, it's a whole new market that a lot of agents don't think about and aren't educated about.
That's right. No, and that's just wowing to me, because $5 trillion worth of residential mortgages, all done in between 2020 to 2022, 80% of them. That's crazy, you guys. I mean, think about that. Think about that opportunity there, right? This is why we want to bring value and get people geared up, because, when a market changes, look, there's nothing negative about it. It's those that see the opportunity that succeed and scale and get into a pivoting moment where you make a lot of money, right? And so I'm glad we recorded these classes. And again, I always say, if anybody has anything to contribute, please open up your mic and do so. But this is huge, and it's extremely important because, right now, John, answer this. And if you did, I just want to repeat it. But how many loans is Carrington servicing right now in
So we're
volume?
servicing about 1.2 million mortgages. And looking to have that number grow, throughout the year as the market continues to change.
Do you believe? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was saying, we're experiencing about that 10% of that portfolio is short sale candidates and/or default candidates. And that's really industry standard right now. So, the numbers are really hard to even wrap your brain around because they're so big, right? It's such a big opportunity.
So there's 1.2 million mortgages. Do you know what that equates to in the volume, the dollars volume?
It's like it's like 167 billion. Is
167 billion. Who's our mathematician? Tim's off camera, so he's probably doing something, but he's usually the one I would call upon. TJ, you're here. You're his son. No. Where's Michael Higdon? You can be the mathematician on this. I mean, think about this for a second. If your calculator will do this, 167 billion. And I'm just going to throw out something, just to be on the small side of things. Okay, 167 billion times that by 10%. Tell us what this is. Somebody type it in the chat. That I know it's a lot of zeros.
16,700,000,000.
I'm sorry.
16,700,000,000.
Okay, 16,700,000,000 times 2.5%. Let's be cheap today. Times 2.5%.
417 million.
$417 million worth of potential commission earnings. Imagine that. $417 million worth of potential commission. And that's just off of one loan servicing company, guys. That's just off of one loan servicing company. See why these people need to be your friends? See why you need to be able to be into this business, not only be an expert that's representing your client, your sellers the right way, but also shining when you're submitting those packages in, because this is the partner and these are the people that you're negotiating with. And these are the people, like I told you all before, back in my heyday of doing it, I was getting the servicers calling me and sending me these opportunities because the packages were that stellar. I made it so easy for them to work and negotiate on my files because I did my work ahead of time, right? Did it like a pro. Because loan servicing companies, they service debt. They're managing the streams of the income and the expenses and everything that's happening on that loan. They are not, and John, you tell them, they don't want to be in the property management business, right?
Exactly. No, exactly right. And two points to say there. One is, right now is a great time because we just talked about all these huge numbers, but we're not quite there yet, right? And so But if you try to get into the space and create these relationships when it's crazy, they don't have time to be like, oh yeah, I remember this person was so good. Because they're just trying to get through as many files as you can. But right now, when there's this I'll call it a little bit of a lull, right? You can say, hey, I'm really good at this. And they'll remember, oh, this agent is super good at short sales. Their package comes in. So then when it does get crazy, they're pushing as many files as you can handle to you. But then exactly what Stephanie said, right, is their job is to work these files through and get them off their desk, because every day there's a non-performing mortgage on the servicing book, the servicer's losing money. And that's just industry wide, right? So the quicker, so the servicer's mind is, I'd rather get this off my books and lose 30 grand right now, or 50 grand, versus going through a foreclosure process or trying to work something else out and ultimately lose 75 grand. And how much other work am I going to have to do internally, hire additional people to work through the file, versus, they're like, oh, here's an easy out for me. I can move this property. I can get it off my books. And yes, I'll take a little bit of a loss, but it's going to be less of a loss in the long run. And so, they're looking to move these properties as quick as possible, and they want to, partner with people that can do that efficiently.
That's awesome. Does anybody have any questions at this time? Feel free. Yes, Michael.
And you may have mentioned this from a timing aspect, whether in order to not waste your time, waste John's time, or whatever title company you're using, are you getting the listing signed before or after you employ your title company?
So here's my process, and everybody can create their own, but my process is I get the listing appointment scheduled. The next call I make or email I send is to my title partner at Villa to say, okay, I need you to run preliminary title. That way, when I show up to that listing appointment, I already have the clear and accurate picture of exactly what I'm faced, to deal with. Back in the day, I used to get referrals from other agents in the Louisville market that knew how to do short sales, but they would see a whole list of crazy and say, oh my God, I don't even know how to start here. I don't know how to talk to the IRS. I don't know how to talk to, these different. So that's one of the things of not saying no to those and being able to work through those files, I think is another big reason why places like Carrington and BSI and these different servicing companies would refer me business, because I knew how to work through those processes because I had a great title partner.
And Michael, on that point too, we have a ton of tools that we provide, our clients, that you can get information like a property profile and some different reporting and stuff we provide that, will give you a high level download on that property. It'll give what they bought it for, the current mortgage, are they current on taxes, so you can start to pull in some of that info so that, one, it's helpful to go win the listing, and then two, you kind of know what you're walking into. Now, granted, that information isn't as rock solid as a full title prelim, but it gets you a much ahead of the game, from a high level, looking at an education standpoint, what you can go talk to that client about.
Yeah, and I guess we have to be stronger as agents, Stephanie, on the pre-qual when we're going out, to make sure that they're not kind of, I guess, despondent in their situation, and making sure that they're, again, they're not going to be wasting your time. And, well, I don't want to go through a foreclosure. I don't want to do a short sale. It's like, okay, you have to discern that before you go out.
100% on that listing call and winning that potential listing. That's exactly what I'm doing, is I'm going through that interview process. And remember, on last week when I showed you the seller checklist of everything that I expect of them, they're receiving that ahead of me showing up to that property, right? They're receiving that because in my mind, I am there to help them. Honestly, in my mind, whether this is right or wrong, in my mind, it's true and it is right. I'm there to come to a rescue. That's what I'm doing, because I am a problem solver. And so I'm there to come to their rescue, and people can't be rescued if they don't help out in the process. And so I'm very clear at those. And the only reason why I'm very clear in those processes is because the first 5 or 10 that I didn't have those understandings. So I learned along the way of how can I make this a more efficient process so that I'm sitting at a closing table, because yeah, we want to all be the hero, but ultimately we're also in this for our living, and we want to make them successful, and we want to make sure that we don't spend 3 months, 4 months, 6 months worth of work and never get paid for the deal. That's the worst, right?
I have a
That was my
question.
question. Oh, go ahead.
Oh,
Yeah.
I did some preliminary checking on recent list pendants, or NEDs as we're called here in Denver. If there's a lot of them that I'm seeing, they have like a lot of equity. They have like over $100,000 in equity. Can you justify to a bank, hey, I would like you to take less so that my seller can walk away with something? Or are you just basically trying to pay them off?
No, you at that point, I mean, a bank's not going to settle if the property can be sold and they can be paid in full, right? There's not going to be any type of that. They're going to look at that and red flag it like everybody's a scammer that's on the deal. So you definitely don't want to do that. But you're right. There are a lot of circumstances right now where they are still, there to get equity. My team has closed, I think, 4 or 5 in the last month, where none of them were short sales because they happen to have that equity there. But the key to that is that that's the message to that seller, that property owner, is, look, today, I think, I haven't seen your property, but today I believe you can walk away with 37,000. That's going to change extremely quick, because remember, they're not paying the mortgage, right? They're not paying. So they've had this less pendants. That's going to start picking up really fast, because you're not only missing the mortgage payments, but you got interest on top of interest on top of interest. So there's no reason for them to sit in that property and rack up debt against all that equity. Does that make sense?
Totally. And that's why that would be a great pitch to get you in the door. Like, you're going to lose all this money if it gets foreclosed.
That's right. That is right. Who
So
had the
now-
other question?
Yeah, so not all Liz pendants result in a short sell. I mean, you just use the Liz pendants as a foot in the door, so to speak, right?
That's right. That's
Okay.
right.
My second,
And I'll just tack on there to what, Stephanie said. If there is a list pendants, then you're not paying something, then, that's maybe they lost their job and they had, 10 grand in savings. And so they're paying their mortgage off, but they couldn't pay their HOA or they couldn't pay their taxes. So that's like exactly what you're saying, Paul, is you can get in the door there and say, hey, we have an opportunity here to sell your house and you can walk away with, 5 grand and be clear of all that debt. But if we wait any longer, or if market conditions change or interest rates rise, that might drop your property down to, underwater, and then you're going to be in a short sale. So,
right. So the second part of that question would be that we have to basically, we're carrying that inventory. Then once we've gone to title and everything else, we've got all our information, the bank is agreeing to, our terms or whatever the case may be. No matter what the market conditions are, we're going to be carrying that listing though, correct? I mean, we're responsible from that point forward. So therefore, if it doesn't sell, then, my old broker used to always say there's nothing worse than, the only thing worse than having no listings is having a listing that won't sell.
Right.
So, that's,
Well,
we need to approach that with caution. I mean, we should probably be cherry picking, I would say, to some extent, the homes by actually doing drive-bys and seeing if this is something that will sell.
yeah. And the condition's going to play a big factor in that. I mean, everything's sellable at the right price, correct? So, it is a way to use those disclaimers and say, look, based on my, drive by or looking up on the computer, my CMA of your property, it looks like you might have $37,000 worth of equity. But until I get there and see it for myself, I can't tell you what that number is. Can I come by at 5 o'clock on Wednesday? Right.
Right. Okay.
and that's too, Paul, where I'd say, you can reach out to us and pull, some of our reports that we have, right? Because it might say, okay, this house is valued at, in the appraiser system at 800,000, but that was last year and they don't know what homes are currently selling for. And so, the property profile will show what's due on taxes, what the mortgage is, and then here's 20 comps, in the area. So maybe that house is valued at, 800,000, but all the homes around it are actually selling for, 695. It's like, okay, well, it looks like you have equity in your home, but you actually don't, or you have a lot less than you thought. And we can sell it for probably 695, but who knows how long that market's going to last. to your point, that's where you come in and kind of show your expertise.
Okay, perfect.
Kate, your hand's up.
Hey, I know I've asked you this in the past, and I cannot remember. I think you just said don't mess with them, but as far as, not sellers, but I've seen over the years, like seized properties, the government properties, IRS. And so don't they not need a realtor partner as well? Like, how do you access it? I mean, because those people are in trouble as well, right? I just don't remember exactly
Well,
what you said about
yeah,
that.
I mean, well, if a lien's been filed by one of, by the Internal Revenue Service or that,
Mhm.
then you can absolutely go, after those properties. However, if they already own the property, then
Mhm.
they usually will take those to these public auctions. They get
Right.
published and they do mass auctions on those properties. And so that's what's harder to win is that government contract. I'm not saying it's not possible. It's just a path I never went down to try to win
Right.
the government
Once
contracts
they
to
own
sell.
it.
Yeah,
Yeah. But if
yeah,
they still own it and it's just like tied up in a court process, they still legally can sell it, right?
yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
You just have to
Okay.
do the typical negotiations. I don't know how many of the short sales I did where we were
Mhm.
literally corresponding with the Internal Revenue Service, which out of Louisville, Kentucky, the closest office that governs this area was in Cincinnati, Ohio. And I'm back and forth, literally negotiating with them on
Mhm.
taking a settlement, right? And so the difference between the IRS and state tax debt is it's typically they'll take a settlement for the transaction, but your seller still owes the rest of their unpaid tax debt. Okay.
Right.
So
Okay.
you can't ever say that that's going to be wiped away because it usually never is unless they hire a CPA that specializes in tax negotiation, which is not our
Right.
specialty.
Okay. Thank you.
Awesome. All right. Any other questions? So Dave, you put a question in the chat and I'm going to let John answer this. Should we assume that all title companies are experienced and good at handling short sales, or should we gauge the suitability of a title company and how?
Yeah, so definitely not, especially coming after this large refi boom. You had a lot of shops that, all they did was refi or traditional purchase. So you definitely want to try and vet your title company and get a true understanding how many short sales they've done, what their process is like. For example, Bill Title, like I said, is owned by Carrington, and we were born out of the Great Recession. And so all of our people are all foreclosure, short sale, default specialists. And then we kept all that crew on staff and we just trained them how to do refis because refis and traditional purchases are easy. And it's really a special skill set to be able to close a short sale. And how you can vet your local title company or anything like that is ask them, how many short sales have you done? How long has the company been around? I mean, any title company that's probably been started since 2015 doesn't have a lot of experience, I'd say. And then you can ask them questions just like we talked about, how do you help me in a short sale? What do you do to build, your CD and your package? How are you going to help me? And if they don't know the default and the short sale space, you're going to tell right away because they'll start, oh, we'll build the package. And it's like, well, tell me about the debtor or tell me how you're going to, build this package. Am I going to have to do it? And you'll be able to tell.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Awesome. Awesome. Kate, do you have another question or did you just leave your hand up?
Sorry, I do not. I don't know how to put
Okay,
it
cool.
down.
No
Okay.
worries. Paul?
Yeah, one more question. So with the negotiation process with all the lien holders, is that our responsibility? And I'm not sure. I mean, like I said, is it my responsibility to reach out to the IRS and negotiate the payoff on these certain levels of priority, first position, second position, third, and all that? So is that my job as well, is to go after these lien holders and work something out with them, or does the title do that?
Yeah. So I think, like, for example, we'll do that, right? We'll call, order a payoff, work on your behalf, say, hey, this is what this is our package, essentially present that to them. But a lot of title companies won't. And that's kind of back to where you need a really strong partner that's going to do that back end work for you so you can be out there listing your property, making sure it gets sold, and then we can kind of do that back end work and really be a true partner to you.
And Paul, you know, when I first got going in the short sales, like heavily doing, you know, a few hundred a year back in, you know, 2008, 9 and through, I started out doing all the negotiations because I didn't have a title partner at the time that even knew what the hell I was talking about. Okay. So you know, I was doing all that. I got up to about 30, 40 files at one given time, and I had no time to do anything else because if I missed that bank calling me at 8:08 p.m. Eastern time at night, because they're a West Coast bank and I didn't answer, it'd take me another week before I got them on the phone again, you know? And so that's why the title partner, I will always say, is so important. Whether it's your local whoever it is, you just have to have that clear and understanding of what they're going to do in that process and that they know how to do it. Because there's big money in this, not only for real estate agents to build a huge thriving business, but also for title companies to do the exact same thing. And so it's not like they're volunteering and donating their efforts, because they provide, the right ones will provide that service as well. Okay.
Exactly. And that's where that experience comes in, right? So someone who's just done traditional purchases, they're just used to, oh, I'm going to call the old mortgage company and maybe it's, you know, Bank of America or Wells Fargo and say, hey, I need to order a payoff. They're used to that, but they don't know how to call them and say, hey, we're entering into a short sale, or we'd like to enter into a short sale, because you need that lender to approve, right? You're not just going to be like, oh, hey, here's this amount and your client's going to walk out free. That's why you present that package. They have to call and essentially negotiate and explain, hey, this is why you should take this. Here's the amount, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a much, and there's a lot of other factors that go into it, but it's much different than calling up, you know, Bank of America and saying, hey, I need a payoff because this property is being sold. This is why you should take this loss. And here's, you know, my package, and here's how we're going to clear this asset quickly.
Okay. One last question, Stephanie, did you employ a transaction coordinator at any point while you were, you know, carrying all these files? So that sounds like just a crap ton of paperwork.
Crap ton. I love it. You're exactly right. I hired my first assistant / transaction coordinator 6 months into being in the real estate business. So I got into the industry in 1999 at 21. And by 22, I had my own staff person, because you're right. It is a crap ton and it is a lot to keep up with. But again, having, you know, to streamline the process and not having all that heavy lift on you, you know. But yeah, having a transaction coordinator, honestly, just to get that paperwork together and send it to you so you can, you know, get it printed or however you're going to fill out that package, that's going to help you tremendously. But it's not necessary. It just depends on how busy you end up getting. But look, if you're doing 50, 100, 200 short sales a year, you're going to be not only you know, an icon mega agent at EXP, but you're going to be making a pile of money. You're going to need that tax write-off.
Right. Awesome. Thank you. Okay.
Any other questions, you all? Yes,
one
Patricia.
go
ahead, Kevin.
Yeah, I put one in the chat, and I was hoping you covered this in a previous Zoom. Is there a ripening for Liz pendants? Should we like wait a couple of months, like see it's been Liz pendants for 2 months or 5 months or even longer? Or
No. When that Liz pendants is scanned in and it is public record, you hit it right then and there. Let me tell you something about that. If you wait, somebody else in your market's going to get there first. This business may not be about how much you know about it today, and that whether you are or are not a short sale expert, you need to get on the call first and you need to land that appointment first. And you make sure, if you did miss class 1 and 2, go back and watch them. That's why we record them, and that's why they're housed in our group, so that you all can go back and do that. But land that business. Every day you wait is a day you'll never get that deal ever.
Well, also because time is of the essence, because if I look at the notice of intent to cure, you have to file that 15 days before the date of sale. So basically, as soon as the list pendants or net is filed, you're just waiting for that auction date to be set. And we don't really know how behind
Yeah.
they are, right? It could be anytime, right?
That's right. That's right. And I mean, that's the thing. I mean, this is a fast, jump on it fast, get to it fast, and get all your processes and systems planned out now, but you can also plan as you go. My first 5-10, I was truly didn't even have a process. I was just seeing if I could make it work. And then we built the process.
Yeah, and if
Okay.
anyone's looking for more info too, I'd say reach out to me and my team. We have a bunch of different tools that can help you guys, give you more information, and available nationwide. So we have a team that's extremely familiar with this process as well. So happy to talk in more detail if anyone has questions or wants to dive into it anymore. Just reach out to me and I'll put my contact information in there too.
Yeah, go ahead and put that contact information in. I just put your email address in there, John, but give them all your information. And that's what I love about this is that they're there. These are there. They're out there. There was in my county, there was 792 filed in the last 10 days. That's huge, right? So next week's class. Thank you so much, John, for being here. And we might even have you back for next week's, because we're going to get into, not only are we going to go through a little bit more of reviewing what we've already been through, but I'm going to show you how to identify code violations on property. So somebody that's not taking care of their property, how do you find the code violations? Because if they can't afford to put back that gutter or mow the lawn, maybe they've got a financial issue happening, right? So then we're going to talk about the property maintenance cases that they get filed and how you negotiate those debts. I'm going to share a story, and if I can get him, he always hangs out in the shadows. But my son, Dylan, he's 23 years old. I think he owns 10 properties, and he's bought them solely off of property maintenance cases. He's 23. Mama didn't give him a dime. He's done it. He owns an entire city block doing this. So we're going to go through that next week. Okay. And then we're also going to talk about how can we find those loans that are coming due in the future and doing more about that. We'll do a whole entire review, but if anybody missed weeks 1 and 2, go back and watch those before you show up to 4, because we're going to get to work on something that no one else has shown you. Now, many of you may already know how to find this information, and that's phenomenal. But I'm going to share with you next week exact success stories and how you really make big money doing it. So I can't wait for next week. John, thank you so much for being here. Everybody reach out to John if you have any information or questions or whatever that you want. If you've got your own title partner, great. Go to them, interview them and make sure that they understand this process and they're there to service you day one, because when you get going on this, you're going to have a lot of opportunities, and you don't need to be interviewing a title person at that given moment. So thanks, everybody. We'll see you next week, next Wednesday, which is March 22nd, same time, 11 a.m. Eastern time.
Thank you so much, Stephanie.
All right.
Stephanie.
Thank you, Patricia.
Thank you. You missed my question.
I'm sorry, go for it. Do it. What's your question?
Okay. So in the 90s, we didn't really have virtual assistants.
Yeah.
And carrying that many files, do you think a VA could handle a short sale process?
100%. Yeah. 100%. You're going to have to train them up a little bit, right? It's all about paperwork. It's all about knowing, but you work through a few deals with them and they'll get to it. I mean, it's really not that difficult, you guys. I mean, there's all kinds of checklists and processes that you can put out on a simple, sheet that they follow and just do that. Okay. But get the business first, do a little bit of paperwork, get building it, and then find that right person. But yeah, a VA can absolutely do it. My son's going to kick my butt for saying all this, but he has a VA that makes all his phone calls for him and finds all these, exports all this info. He's automated the whole entire thing. I don't even know if he talks to people, but he has absolutely automated it with a VA from, I forget what country.
Gotcha. That was my question.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
All right, guys. Thank you all. Have a great one.